The conversations over whether James Bond should be played by a black actor have been going on for a couple years now, probably about like maybe 5 or 6 years. And of course, the lead person people often say should play him is Idris Elba. Now, of course, the new James Bond is out, I think, or it's coming out this weekend. And it features a black woman playing 007. And that's like, a big deal and everything. But Daniel Craig has doubled down and said that James Bond should be played by a man. Of course, anti-SJWs have loved that stuff. But a bit of a hot take. I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't think James Bond should be played by a black actor for a completely different set of reasons. Because I think because of James Bond the character, I think he's helped sanitize MI6. Because, you have Jack Ryan, I guess, in America, played by John Krasinski, who starts talking about how great the CIA are. But that does sanitize the CIA, and plenty of films and video games do that. So, by my logic, that is the same with MI6 and James Bond. So, I don't want this character being recast as traditionally a minority in the UK that is treated really poorly by the establishment, including groups like MI5 and MI6, not even traditionally even being able to get into positions of power in MI6 like James Bond. So I feel like this overall helps sanitize British imperialism, because James Bond essentially has been part of propaganda for the British establishment for about 60 years. At the same time, it would probably be worth it for them to cast a black James Bond, or even a black female James Bond, just to see how reactionaries would react. But I'm going to get into all of this and the history of MI6 in the video. Before we get any further, I want to plug my social medias and Patreon for about a minute, so skip that if you're not interested. Before we get any further, a lot of my work on this channel is demonetized because when you're covering more serious, sometimes edgier topics, YouTube doesn't like this. So if you've ever enjoyed my work, please consider becoming a patron. And you don't have to pledge a crazy amount. I want to build up my Patreon based on as many people as possible pledging little amounts, like $1 or $2. So if you feel like I have ever brought anything that's worthwhile into your life and my content, please really consider becoming a patron to help me continue to do this, regardless of if YouTube monetize or not most of my videos in a given month. Also, if you want to join our communities, come check out our Discord and my subreddit. Those links in the description. And if you want to follow me personally, please check out the Kavernacle at Twitter, at Instagram, and also my personal Reddit, where you can keep up to date with all my content and what I'm doing. For every 5k, we get a new chocolate orange. I'm close to 45 now, and I want to hit 50 by the end of the year, so that's 2 new oranges for the pyramid. Please help me reach that goal. Also, I live stream 2 times a week on a Tuesday and a Thursday. All of that is archived on the Kavernacle Extra. So to start this video, I want to talk about Daniel Craig's comments on a female James Bond, and then I want to talk about the conservative anti-SJW reaction to these comments, or just the general idea of a black person playing James Bond. So the Den of Geek. Daniel Craig doesn't think a woman should be James Bond. He doesn't think the next Bond should be played by a woman. The answer to that is very simple, Craig told Radio Times. There should simply be better parts for women and actors of colour. Why should a woman play James Bond when there should be a part that is just as good as James Bond, but for a woman? Even actors in the film would appear to disagree with Craig, including Lashana Lynch. In an interview with The Guardian last week, Lynch seemed to suggest that a woman theoretically could play the next Bond, even while saying that she herself didn't want to. They're actually giving the audience what they want to give the audience. With Bond, it could be a man or a woman. They could be white, black, Asian, mixed race. They could be young or old. And at the end of the day, even if a 2-year-old was playing Bond, everyone would flock to the cinema to see what this 2-year-old's going to do, no? So Craig's statements, in my mind, aren't really that controversial, in the sense that, maybe he could be a bit more open to, I guess, maybe a female James Bond. But to be honest, I don't really care, because James Bond as this character is like this heterosexual white male power fantasy. And that is literally the essence of the character. Tied with him being like a stand-in for British imperialism and this bygone age of Britain's important role in the world. And obviously James Bond has pushed, a very imperialist agenda throughout until like the more modern ones with like Pierce Brosnan, even though those are pretty bad. But Daniel Craig is like the more self-aware, serious one where James Bond has a bit more edge to him, and he's a pretty brutal killer. He's not as smooth as previous Bonds. He's just very, very effective. So kind of like blurring the lines a bit more. But overall, the message of James Bond is a hero. M, either Ralph Fiennes or Judi Dench, they are heroes. And people working in MI6 just do this to help the UK and save the world. Sure, you know, like I was saying with the Daniel Craig ones, there are shades of grey. And obviously, Javier Bardem's character in Skyfall was like a former MI6 agent that was betrayed by M. So just showing that this, you know, whole line of work can be pretty brutal. But overall, James Bond is never seen as a bad guy. The MI6 are never seen as bad guys. So first of all, I want to show you the anti-SJW reaction to Daniel Craig's comments because they're really happy.
Speaking of the Radio Times, Craig has now offered his own opinion that there should simply be better parts for women and actors of color. Oh my God, finally! This is what, you know, Comicsgate started saying. This is what most people in various fandoms have been saying for years. You don't do women any favors by tokenizing them or race swap or gender swapping them. You do them favors by writing strong characters that people will love who happen to be women. This is the same garbage argument that we saw in video games forever and ever, where you had, you know, oh, there are no strong independent women characters. Okay, well, what about Tomb Raider? Well, that doesn't count. Why? Well, because pointy boobs. I don't know. Like, it's so stupid. There's many strong female characters. Seamus, you could just... Is there as many as men? Probably not. But what is the correct percentage exactly? I'd like to know. He questioned, why should a woman play James Bond when there should be a part just as good as James Bond, but for a woman?
So anyway, we're going to get into this and see what Daniel Craig himself has to say. He says, speaking with Radio Times as reported by The Independent, Craig stated, there should simply be better parts for women and actors of color. What? You mean what we have been saying here at Geeks and Gamers all along? Daniel Craig is actually agreeing with us. Really? Very, very interesting. This is exactly what we have been saying for years. Stop trying to replace already iconic established characters and giving them to as like these weird like hand-me-downs to women and people of color. Stop doing that and create new iconic characters for these people. But it's almost like you guys aren't confident enough in women or people of color to be able to carry new franchises or become iconic characters. And honestly, that is pretty shameful. This is actually kind of crazy. I'm actually surprised that Daniel Craig is saying this, because this is exactly the way that everyone should be looking at this. James Bond absolutely should be a male. Now look, I don't even have a problem with, you know, black men playing James Bond. I don't, you know, I think that Idris Elba would be an amazing James Bond. Now, there's probably people that are going to get me about that from the other side of the spectrum. That's fine, no. But I think that Idris Elba could play an amazing James Bond. I think he can. I think that he has the male charisma that James Bond possesses to play that character.
So there you have the Quartering and Geeks and Gamers talking about how they like the comments, and it's what they've always said, and you know, what they've always believed, which, you know, I highly doubt. And, you know, even some of them saying that they would welcome a black James Bond if it's played by one of their favourites. These guys have favourites, which I don't care as much about, like Will Smith or Idris Elba. But if it was, you know, a black guy that they weren't a fan of, maybe just a lesser known one, they probably would be quite mad, in my opinion. But now we get to like outright racism. Here's Steven Crowder talking about a black James Bond covered by the Majority Report.
But continue here. Let's hear his complaint that we need a black James Bond.
A black James Bond. This is the issue when people talk about it. It's like you're injecting race where it doesn't need to be. And let me just say this one thing. This is one area when people talk about a black James Bond. There is no lack of representation of black American men in the action hero genre. If you were to have Will Smith at his peak, right? Will Smith, Men in Black, Independence Day, and run it opposite a James Bond vehicle on the same weekend, Will Smith would have decimated it. Will Smith,
Easily.
Denzel Washington, for crying out loud, they tried to sell us Jamie Foxx as an action hero. Shaft. There are plenty of black male action heroes.
Richard Roundtree is and will always be the only Shaft.
He will only be
anybody
Yeah,
says.
the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes sense to have a black James Bond. I don't have a problem with it because you're pulling from
It
a
makes
culture.
zero
His name's
sense.
I think
James
it's
Bond and
perfectly
he's a
fine.
white
Really, it
man.
makes sense to
Ian
have Idris
Fleming's a
Elba
white.
on a tarmac undercover in Siberia. Oh, where is the spy? I don't know. The only not white thing in whole peripheral.
Yeah, it's not good when it's like, we're going to need you to be at the ball and ready to meet our contact at 11:43, and then they're like, guys, it's 1:30.
Where is our spy?
Look, the script would have to change a little, granted. No, but I think
Did you
that makes
turn
sense.
my Ferragamos into a phone?
And the problem is then he's going to take out the anti-aircraft guns to put in subwoofers, hit
I
the
didn't
button.
say-
Yeah.
Look, I didn't say
You
put
need the
Chris
tunes. I don't know
Rock
what
in.
they-
Turbo, that's
Yeah.
what plays Drake.
He's being so nakedly racist there that it almost as if like they're not like the entire crew is not even laughing.
It's not
at
about
him
being
anymore.
funny right now. It's about being serious.
Exactly.
And that
Like,
guy-
and we're gonna take out the aircraft carrier and put in like big speakers. This is just racist garbage.
So as you can see there, just like fully mask off racist. Again, this guy gets away with everything on YouTube. And I think it's ridiculous really to say James Bond can't be black. And like I said at the start of the video, I don't want him to be black for reasons I'm going to get into in a sec. But of course James Bond can be black. Black people make up like the fabric of British celebrity now. Britain has changed a lot since the original James Bond came out, but even back then, Britain was a fairly diverse place, including in cities especially, and there was lots of black British people who lived here, or immigrants from the Caribbean, or ex-colonies in Africa and stuff like that. But these days, I think of top British talent in like music, acting, football, like most of our best players are all black footballers. So it's just, you know, very interesting to say that this character who is like in some ways representing Britain couldn't be played by a black guy. And it just tells you kind of like everything you need to know. Like I can understand the arguments for, you know, not having a woman play as James Bond, but at the same time, what is a serious argument that you can't have a black James Bond? Not only has this character been done a load of times and there isn't really a continuity between any of them. Like I said, black people from various different cultures in Britain have contributed so much to the culture that we all enjoy. Of course, a black person could play James Bond. But now getting into my take why I don't really want a black person to play James Bond, and it's like multifaceted. Now, something that was interesting earlier this year in Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney Plus was this character of Isaiah Bradley, who was a former Captain America, who had this argument with Sam Wilson about, you know, a black person being Captain America, and should you take on this mantle that represents this country that historically has never treated black people fairly, and of course has a brutal history and even like a brutal current with how America treats black people. And that's a really interesting argument in that show. I feel like it really botched it though, because Sam Wilson kind of just like discards how badly Isaiah has been treated and takes up this mantle where he is in essence working for the US government, right? But Captain America is a fictional role. He's working for the US government, but he has his own like autonomy in some ways, where James Bond very much is British intelligence. He works for MI6. He does the agenda of British intelligence, which has been responsible for awful things. So in my mind, you get someone who is from a minority to play James Bond, it further sanitizes him. Remember that CIA advert where they had a Latina woman talking about like her family life and her upbringing and getting through all these hurdles to work in the CIA. It's stuff like that. Of course, you know, that shouldn't really be celebrated, because what have the CIA historically done to the countries that loads of Latin immigrants are from? Brutalized them, propped up brutal dictators, overthrown democratically elected socialist governments. It's not like woke or great for these types of people to be joining an intelligence service that has actively hurt the cultures and communities they're from. So I feel that way with a black James Bond, because The British establishment have never liked black people. The British establishment, even today with the police forces and intelligence services, is constantly attacking black people. Might not be as visible as America, for example, but it's still there. Now, James Bond obviously serves as a propaganda tool for MI6. So this article from a couple of years ago in The Guardian, James Bond's still a strong recruitment sergeant for MI6, says experts. James Bond remains a powerful recruitment tool for MI6, a secret intelligence expert says, despite claims he's unrealistically posh and violent. Dr. Rory Cormack, Associate Professor of International Relations with a speciality in secret intelligence at Nottingham University, said MI6 loved the positive brand provided by Ian Fleming's fictional spy. They like the image it creates. It's a great recruitment sergeant as well, although a lot of people who want to become James Bond get weeded out very early as they're psychopaths. Cormac said the spy was also positive for intelligence diplomacy. When MI6 agents are trying to make contact with people in other countries as part of operations, they have been known to be greeted with "Hello, Mr. Bond." It helps break the ice. In 2016, Alex Younger, the chief of Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, said the fictional stereotypes in Fleming's book had created a view of an MI6 officer that bore no resemblance to reality. And he goes on to say, he has created a powerful brand for MI6. As C, the real-life version of M, there are few people who will not come to lunch if I invite them. Many of our counterparts envied the sheer global recognition of our acronym. Were Bond to apply to join MI6 now, he would have to change his ways. And also on Thursday, Cormac said that Alan Dulles, the director of the CIA between 1953 and 61, when Fleming's first Bond books were arriving on shelves, was a huge fan. The CIA director and the author would go on to become good friends, and Fleming would later include a reference to Dulles in The Man with the Golden Gun, ending a book, a scene in which Bond is shown to be reading Dulles' 1963 book about his own career. Obviously, Dulles is this awful guy in the CIA working in American intelligence in the 50s in the Cold War. Lots of people thought he might have been involved in the JFK assassination. Of course, that's what Oliver Stone believes in his film JFK, but just a generally bad person. So obviously, like they're saying, James Bond is very effective for recruiting people. He gives this brand that is globally recognized and makes it like cool, essentially, to be an MI6. Like this guy says, I can invite anyone to dinner and they'll take that dinner because they know I'm an MI6, and because of the reputation we have because of James Bond, that really, really helps. So can you see why maybe I don't want a black person playing James Bond, where you can further like sanitize this image of, you know, MI6 not actually being a key part of British imperialism in the past and the present, but now it's like woke. It's like also very diverse and anyone can join and become James Bond. Isn't that lovely? So recently they've also had a campaign to try and increase minorities in MI6. So MI6 has recently eased its nationality and age rules. A recruitment ad campaign in 2018 sought to encourage more women and ethnic minority candidates to apply, as well as older people. Under old rules, candidates had to have at least one parent with British nationality or ties to the UK in order to apply. The rules have been relaxed, but applicants themselves still have to be British citizens. However, even if both parents are migrants, people born in the UK can join MI6. Now, before we get into how awful MI6 is, I want to talk about the recruitment a bit more. Because although I couldn't find this stuff on MI6, it's from MI5, which is the domestics, like, spy agency, basically. Think of it like the FBI, essentially. But there's files that show that they believed black people historically posed security risks. That's why they wouldn't even hire them. And even today, these intelligence agencies barely have any minorities in the upper echelons. So not only is it this key tool for British imperialism, it also has maintained the traditional, I guess, British image of mainly hiring white people. So, a Guardian article in 2018, MI6 believe black people pose security risks, papers reveal. It's widely known that MI6 had a deep distrust of Jewish people. There was a surprising omission of any reference to security concerns about black people in their official history. Since the 1940s, there were bans on communists. In the 1950s, this was extended to what described as character defects, such as being gay, having a mental illness, being an alcoholic, on the grounds that this would make people vulnerable to blackmail. New papers reveal that the officials also saw race as a security issue. Jabir Butt, the chief executive of the Race Equality Foundation, said he was not surprised. Various investigations into the civil service, as well as recent reports, have all pointed towards a lack of diversity. Neither MI6, which deals with overseas intelligence, nor MI5 had any people from black, Asian, or minority ethnic backgrounds in top posts in 2016 to 2017. The surveillance agency GCHQ was the only agency listed as having any staff at a senior level from a BAME background, but said, to discover that this has been a long-running issue is not surprising, considering what the report said. It shows yet again that things are not changing, and they haven't for a long time. The papers show that identity has always been a big part of who's been appointed, yet history shows those who have gone on to betray the country have nearly always been white British men. So not only do I disagree with a black James Bond because of, like, I don't want them to sanitize British imperialism even more, it's just, you know, not even that realistic if you're doing propaganda for them to say that, like, well, look, you can join MI6 and become like a top agent like James Bond, because there's not really much diversity in MI6, especially in the top positions. So you're really going to be joining an organization where you're probably going to be facing the same institutional racism that you face anywhere else. Again, like, that's why I feel like this sort of stuff just, like, woke washes, is that like a word? Just, like, makes it seem like it's not as bad as it is. And thanks to James Bond, even you watching this probably don't think MI6 are as bad as the CIA. In my mind, they are. They just don't have as much of a global reach as the CIA. So we're going to get into how awful they are and why I disagree even more with, you know, maybe people from minorities or women playing James Bond on the grounds that I don't want them to sanitize MI6 any further. So here's how intelligence helped in the coup, which saw Pinochet come to power, uncovering Britain's secret role in protecting Chile's 1973 coup. British intelligence officers in Chile were sent to infiltrate the Chile Solidarity Campaign, a movement backed by Labour MPs, trade unions, students and church groups. The Secret Service reports, declassified earlier this year, can now be seen at the National Archives in Kew. Journalists were another Foreign Office target, complaining of black propaganda against the Chilean army. British officials tried to manipulate the news. When a team from the BBC Panorama programme visited Chile in November 1973, staff at the British Embassy secured them maximum cooperation from the junta. The embassy was optimistic about the slant of this documentary, which included interviews with members of the Anglo-Chilean business community speaking approvingly about the coup. A British embassy official wrote, "The balance of the programme should be about 60 to 75% favourable to the new regime." The embassy was not so pleased with a World in Action Granada TV team that arrived at the same time. The same official wrote, "I gathered that a WIA producer came to cover torture and shootings. Granada's activities were certainly known to the junta, whose press secretary told me they had been seeing things they should not see." So there you have British intelligence infiltrating union movements in Chile and also helping do propaganda around the world by manipulating this Panorama documentary. Now, one of the most infamous things MI6 has done and has, you know, massive repercussions on world history is they were the main force behind the coup in Iran, which ousted their democratically elected prime minister and installed the Shah as basically an autocratic monarch. Obviously, this was done for the profits of British Petroleum, you guys know as BP, the oil company, and done under the guise of anti-communism. And why they might have feared, you know, the Soviets having an influence, it was more about these governments trying to nationalize their natural resources. So another article from The Guardian, MI6, the coup in Iran that changed the Middle East and the cover-up, goes on to say, the hidden role of a British Secret Service officer who led the coup that permanently altered the Middle East is to be revealed in a detail for the first time since an Observer news story exposed the plot in 1985. The report, headlined "How MI6 and CIA Joined Forces to Plot Iran Coup," appeared in the 26th of May edition. It exposed that an MI6 man, later named as Norman Derbyshire, had run a covert and violent operation to reinstate the Shah of Iran as the ruler of the country in 1953. Yet just a few days after the newspaper came out, all fresh evidence of the British operation and of Derbyshire's identity disappeared from public debate. The Shah, who had been living in exile in Italy, flew back to Iran, then governed by the CIA and MI6 approved General Fazlollah Zahedi. In America, the coup was known as Operation Ajax, while in Britain it was known as Operation Boots. The Shah ruled the country until the Islamic Revolution of 1979. This coup shaped not only the Western relations with Iran for 60 years, but changed the Middle East. Imagine if there had been a democracy there. So a follow-up article saying, a first-hand account of Britain's role in the coup that overthrew the Prime Minister of Iran and restored the Shah has been published for the first time. So Derbyshire, who I mentioned, saying the plan would have involved sieges of key points in the city by what units we thought were loyal to the Shah, seizure of the radio station, the classical plan, recalled Norman Derbyshire, the head of MI6 Persia station in Cyprus at the time of the coup. According to Derbyshire, the main reason MI6 wanted to get rid of Mossadegh was that Britain's spies believed his government, although it contained only one member of the Communist Tudor party, would ultimately be overwhelmed by Soviet influence. I really do believe it, because Mossadegh was a fairly weak character. He said, once you get highly trained members of the Communist Party in, it doesn't take long. We didn't share the American view that he was acting as a bulwark against communism. We thought he would be pushed by the communists in the long run. So there you have MI6 being instrumental in this awful coup, which, you know, installed a brutal dictatorship. Nothing new for the CIA and MI6, but MI6 took the lead on that one specifically. But now, because we're talking about a black James Bond, let's talk about how MI6 has traditionally treated African nations as well. So another coup in the Congo, which MI6 did themselves. So MI6 and the death of Patrice Lumumba. A member of the House of Lords, Lord Lear, has written to the London Review of Books saying that shortly before she died, fellow peer and former MI6 officer Daphne Park told him Britain had been involved in the death of Patrice Lumumba, the elected leader of Congo in 1961. When he asked her whether MI6 might have had something to do with it, he recalls her saying, "We did, I organised it." Piecing together information suggests that while MI6 did not kill him directly, it is possible that it could have been some kind of indirect role. Daphne Park was an MI6 officer in the Congo at a crucial point in the country's history. She arrived just before Congo received independence from Belgium in the middle of 1960. Congo's first elected prime minister was Patrice Lumumba, who was immediately faced with a breakdown of order. There was an army revolt, while secessionist groups in the mineral-rich province of Katanga made their move and Belgian paratroopers returned, supposedly to restore security. Lumumba made a fateful step. He turned to the Soviets for help. This set off a panic in London and Washington, who feared the Soviets would get a foothold in Africa, much as they'd done in Cuba. President Eisenhower held a meeting with the CIA saying that he wanted to eliminate Lumumba. The CIA got to work. It came up with a series of plans, including snipers and poison toothpaste, to get rid of the Congolese leader. They were not carried out because the CIA man on the ground, Larry Devlin, said he was reluctant to see them through. But this was also on the mind of some people in London. A Foreign Office official called Howard Smith wrote a memo outlining a number of options. The first is the simple one of removing him from the scene by killing him. In January 1961, Lumumba was dead. The killing was actually done by fighters from the Congo along with Belgians, and with the almost certain connivance of the Belgian government, who hated him even more than the Americans and the British. Among the senior politicians in the Congo who made the decision to hand Lumumba over to those who eventually did kill him were two men with close connections to Western intelligence. One of them was who I mentioned, Larry Devlin, but the other was close to Daphne Park. She had actually rescued him from danger by smuggling him to freedom in the back of her small Citroen car when Lumumba's people had guessed he was in contact with her. So Lumumba was, of course, like many of these African leaders who were democratically elected, an anti-colonialist. And who does this infuriate? The Belgians, the Americans, the British. He's also someone who is going to take away their corporate monopoly on the natural resources in Congo, which there are many. So this is just another example of how MI6 and Western intelligence just carries out colonialism in Africa still today, and how they would back dictators just to access their natural resources, because there's nothing worse than a democracy with an anti-colonial leader who might prefer the Soviet Union to countries that have historically brutalized this nation. And we talk about Belgium. You guys would have heard about King Leopold and the Congo and stuff. It makes you sick reading this stuff, so I don't want a black James Bond to sanitize that MI6 was instrumental in the oppression of Africans and Africans who wanted to forge their own path in the global community with their own democracies and not be beholden to Western corporate interests. And that generally is the tried and true story of Africa in the post-colonial period. They elect someone, that person is overthrown by a coup, which is usually backed by the CIA or MI6, and then a brutal dictator who the West back is installed. And again, I don't want James Bond further sanitizing the MI6's role in brutal stuff like this. But like I said, this has happened plenty. It's more recently happened in, Sierra Leone. So to get to my overall point, could you make an interesting film with a black James Bond, which heavily plays into James Bond's identity as a black man? You definitely could make an interesting film about that. Like, what is it like for someone to exist in this organization, which is currently and historically institutionally racist, has carried out brutal coups against democratically elected leaders across the world, mainly in non-white countries, for capital, including targeting anti-colonialist African people as well, and brutalizing them and overthrowing them. People who just want this democracy that Britain claims to stand for. Could that be an interesting film? Yes, it could. If Idris Elba is cast as James Bond, will that be the film? No. Will they mention that in the film? Probably not. And what is the overall message that will send? Well, the MI6 is even cooler now. Not only do you have James Bond, who's like this great character and so suave and makes, you know, intelligence work look so, I guess, attractive. Now you have one of Britain's most famous black actors being James Bond, and people might celebrate that as a win for diversity, and I'm not against it, you know, generally. Black people and other minorities getting roles which are more visible, which can boost their visibility, give people heroes. So that's why I'm less against something like a black Captain America, because that's a superhero. You know that's not real. Where James Bond is, you know, in essence a superhero, but he is still really a part of this MI6 mythology. And in essence, you're doing propaganda by being in these films, and this goes to Daniel Craig as well. You're doing propaganda for this organization which is primarily responsible for British colonialism and neo-colonialism and propping up the capitalist status quo we all live in. So I don't want the heroes for people from minorities to be people who spread imperialist propaganda. You know, someone with an Irish background, I really have no love for MI6 either, based on what British intelligence have historically done in Ireland and of course in Northern Ireland as well, and their links to all these Protestant militia groups and what they actually did in Ireland. Now, one final note, this isn't cancelling James Bond. I acknowledge it's MI6 propaganda, while also acknowledging that some of them are good movies. I think the Daniel Craig ones, by and large, are better than all the other ones, and I think films like Skyfall and Casino Royale are just genuinely good movies. And I'm excited to see No Time to Die, to, you know, think about these things that I've been talking about while watching it. I also want to see it because I like Ana de Armas. I like Rami Malek a whole lot from Mr. Robot. Obviously, Ana de Armas is in one of my favourite films, Blade Runner 2049. And I just want to see how the Craig James Bond ends. But in this country, James Bond is just accepted as part of our, like, mythology. He's like Sherlock Holmes. He's like a real person who's not real. And that line was so much more blurred when we had him in the Olympics opening ceremony with the Queen and everything. So again, James Bond as a character has greatly helped sanitize MI6's image, and I don't think any self-respecting person who has decent politics should play him, and that's why by and large I don't want a black person or someone from another minority. I just don't want that because of what this institution has historically done to these countries. But anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would you care about Black James Bond? Is it something you want? If we have to have James Bond anyway, why not give it to Idris Elba? Because, you know, someone has to play him. Let me know what you guys think. If you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to join our communities, check out my Discord and check out my subreddit. And if you want to support my work, please have a look at my Patreon. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.